my name is Dominic Divito, and today I'm going to be doing a short presentation on Solvency II. The points I'd like to cover include going over what Solvency II actually is, then going on to discuss the three pillars of Solvency II, before talking a bit more about the own risk and solvency assessment, the implication on firms and the industry and the insurance industry in general, and the benefits that Solvency II hopes to bring in. So first off, I'd like to discuss what is Solvency II. Solvency II is basically a review of the capital requirements for insurers and reinsurers across Europe, which is due to come into effect in December 2012. The main changes that Solvency II aim to make over Solvency I include aligning the capital that insurers hold more closely to the risks that they're taking on, and also making the standards consistent across all of Europe. Why are they doing this? The reason is they want to better protect policyholders, and also to make trade across Europe easier by having accepted consistent standards across the various countries. So I'm just going to talk about the three pillars of Solvency II in a bit more detail now. Pillar 1 is with regards to quantitative requirements, and brings in a set of kind of instructions on how insurance companies should value their liabilities, and how they should kind of set capital in relation to those liabilities. It also brings in calculations for insurance companies for calculating what's called the minimum capital requirements and the solvency capital requirements. If the insurance company's capital falls below the solvency capital requirements, that would prompt intervention from the regulator and maybe heightened monitoring. If the insurance company was to breach the minimum capital requirement, that would cause major intervention from the regulator and maybe cause the capital requirement for that insurance company to increase. The second pillar, which we've called supervisory review here, is to do with the qualitative aspects of the firm's risk management processes. The main crux of the second pillar is with regards to what's called the own risk and solvency assessment, which I'm going to talk a bit more detail on the following slides, so I won't spend too much time here. But it's basically to do with the risk management processes and systems of the company, making sure they're kind of up to speed. The final pillar is to do with disclosure requirements, and aims to increase market transparency across the insurance industry across Europe. It means that companies will need to develop a strategy for disclosing things such as their capitalisation and risk assessment methodologies to the insurance market, and make things a little bit more open and clear. It also means that insurance companies have in place a internal process for monitoring their risks and reporting these to the market. I mentioned own risk and solvency assessment on the previous slides, which falls within the supervisory review pillar. What this is a internal risk assessment process that the insurance company will need to do kind of internally, taking into account all of the different risks that they're taking on. It must the assessment must take into account the firm's current strategy. So if the strategy was to change and they were taking on different kinds of risks, then they need to reflect that in their own risk and solvency assessment, and report this to the regulators. Basically, this is a way of the regulators making sure that the insurance companies are on top of the risk they're taking on, and they're aware of what's going on within their business. So, just going to talk now about the implications of Solvency II on the insurance industry. One of the major changes that's likely to take place is an increase. Insurance companies are going to find that they need to increase their capital requirements. It's been suggested that non-life insurance companies may need to increase their capital holds by about 13 billion, whereas for life insurance it could be anywhere between 30 billion and 70 billion. The insurance companies are also going to be need to get used to having more intervention from the regulator. There's been kind of maybe a bit of a distance relationship in the past. They're going to get used to kind of working together a bit more closely, and they're also going to need to get to grips with managing and valuing new risks they maybe haven't considered before, such as integration risk from M&A. That's kind of a new risk that the insurance companies haven't considered before, that they're going to have to now think about under the Solvency II requirements. Got a few more implications for kind of individual firms that I'd like to briefly talk about. First off, I've said resources. Companies are going to need to think about bringing in specialists in this area that they haven't previously had before. And they're going to need to spend money training employees and bringing in the right people. This is obviously going to have costs. Companies are going to incur costs for doing this. And setting up the new IT systems and things for calculating their capital in the new way. Internal model. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but this sits within the pillar 1 when we've got the quantitative requirements. I mentioned about the minimum capital requirement and the solvency capital requirement. Solvency 2 provides a set of guidelines of how these should be calculated, but it also gives the insurance companies the flexibility to use their own internal models for calculating the minimum capital requirement and solvency capital requirement if they like. If they decide to do that, then they need to work with the regulators to make sure that the regulator's happy with the internal model that they're proposing and get that approved. There's also going to be a need for companies to manage their risks across the company in a more kind of integrated way. So companies are going to need to consider setting up different systems and processes to manage their risks in that way. Maybe, for example, appointing a chief risk officer, having like a specific risk management section within the company. Also, in terms of monitoring their risks, companies are going to need to set up different systems and processes for monitoring risks across the organisation and reporting these to the regulators. So, and culture. It's probably a rapid culture change for some companies now that they're taking on a more kind of risk management type role. That's going to need approval from kind of the board, work its way through the companies. Companies are going to need to consider this as a further issue. Why is Solvency II come about? Well, one of the reasons that the regulators have decided to come up with Solvency II is they think it may improve shareholder value. They mean this in the sense that by making companies more aware of the risks they're taking on, they believe that companies will be able to manage these risks in a better way, which will help to improve shareholder value. In terms of improving policyholder protection, insurance companies are going to need to hold more capital, which is going to offer more protection. There's also going to be better disclosure to the market, so policyholders will be better informed about what the companies are actually up to. It will also make it easier for firms to kind of grow and expand across Europe by having the same consistent set of laws across Europe. So, in summary, I talked about what is Solvency II, basically just the review of the capital requirements for insurers and reinsurers across Europe, which is due to come into place in December of 2012. I talked about the 3 pillars: the quantitative requirements, which sets rules regarding how companies need to value their liabilities, etc. Supervisory review, making sure companies have appropriate systems in place to manage and monitor the risks across their organisation, and disclosure, providing this information to the market. We talked about some of the implications for firms in terms of needing to hold more capital, needing to get more people on board, needing to maybe restructure the organisations to accommodate the new risk management functions that they're going to need to do. And then I briefly touched on what benefits this would bring for shareholders in terms of making companies more risk conscious, policyholders in terms of making sure their insurance companies are less likely to default by holding more capital, and finally to facilitate trade across Europe in the insurance industry. And that's all. Thank you very much.